The U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.
So I'd like to welcome you all to the June meeting of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, and thank you all for being here. Our next meeting that we will officially have will be our annual planning meeting, which will occur on Saturday, August 22nd, 8 o'clock in the morning at the Tremont Lodge in Townsend, Tennessee. I do want to remind the members that when you speak, please use the microphones because we are being recorded and we want to capture your comments accurately. And after the presentations, when we have the question and answer period, we will have the board members first, then we will go to the public and then back to the board members for a second round should there be any. As I said, there's no monthly meeting here in July. We're going to have new member training. That's going to be on July 8th, and if you wish to attend to get refreshed, you're more than welcome. And that is about all I have to say at this point. I believe now I will turn it over to Ms. Kange, if you would, please.
Good evening, everyone. Is that working? Is the mic working?
Is she on?
Okay. There we go. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Real quickly, I just wanted to mention an upcoming celebration that we'd like to invite the SSAB board members to participate in. Later this month, on Friday, June 26th, Mark Whitney, the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Office of Environmental Management, will be here to help celebrate the demolition of the K31 gaseous diffusion plant building at ETTP. He's going to be speaking that morning at the East Tennessee Economic Council meeting that starts at 7:30. Here in Oak Ridge, and then there will be a bus available to take folks out to the celebration. So if board members are interested in participating, please let Melissa know. Right, Melissa, Pete, or Spencer, let them know so that we can get you all of the proper arrangements and whatnot. And this again is the celebration of the completion of the K31 project, which includes the demolition of that building as well as some other ancillary facilities in the same vicinity. And it is the fourth of the 5 gaseous diffusion plant buildings out at the East Tennessee Technology Park, so that means we just have one more remaining, and that's the K27 building. And we'll have a celebration for that, hopefully at the end of 2016, but for now we're going to celebrate K31. So just wanted to let folks know about that. That's it.
Thank you. We do have some new student representatives here tonight. And if you would please do the honors. I've had the pleasure of meeting them, and it looked like some very outstanding young ladies. So would you care to introduce them?
I would love to introduce them. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
our 2 new students.
Would you student raise your hands, please? So everybody in the audience can see you too.
The first is Alana Joldersma. Alana, there's Alana, there she is. Alana will be a senior at the Oak Ridge High School. This past school year, she was selected to be a co-project manager for the school's first robotics team. And the name of the team is the 4265 Secret City Wildbots. So at some point, you'll have to tell us what 4265 stands for. Alana is interested in film production and is working on a documentary film about the conflict in Israel and Palestine. She has always been very interested in environmental science, and taking advanced placement environmental science in high school fueled that interest in the subject. Alana plans to study film production and perhaps minor in environmental science. It's been a dream of hers to work with National Geographic, perhaps making a documentary film about environmental sciences someday. So welcome, Alana. I hope that your experience with us will be fruitful and that you'll learn some more about environmental work here on the Oak Ridge Reservation. Okay, and our second student is Sophia Sway. By default, that's Sophia, right? Sophia is going to be a senior at the Hardin Valley Academy. She enjoys playing tennis and has been on the Hardin Valley varsity tennis team for the past 3 years. Very impressive. Faye, you may want to get up a game. Yes. Sophia is interested in medicine and health sciences and is thinking about a career in medicine. She's currently the president of the American Red Cross Club at Hardin Valley and volunteers with the local Red Cross to help and support the community. Sophia is also the vice president of Health Occupation Students of America, which competes in health-related knowledge competitions. So thank you for volunteering to spend some time with us. I hope that you also have a positive experience.
Thank you. It's great to see new faces on the board. And it's also bittersweet to have some old faces and some old friends who will be departing. The folks that we're going to be talking about here in a moment have been exceedingly valuable to the input on this board, and I'd like to be able to call them personal friends as well, even if we didn't get to Mexico and we tried walking down there one night. But Ms. Keynes, I believe you have some further awards tonight.
So I, too, am very saddened with the departure of these two members of the Site-Specific Advisory Board, and I know that the rest of the board will join me in honoring you and thanking you for your contribution. Both Jimmy and Faye are leaving us in July after 4 years of service each on the board. So that's quite a commitment, and I want to thank you for that. Since their appointment back in 2011, both these members have served on a number of different committees, and they've absolutely made a significant contribution to the board. So, Faye, for you, and Jimmy, for you. On behalf of the Department of Energy, I'd like to thank you for your 4 years of service on the Site-Specific Advisory Board. I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors and hope that you will come back to visit us and to join us for some of our meetings and activities. So, thank you very much. Thank you. And turn around and see all your compadres there. Yes.
Thank you. Both of you are really going to be missed. I've learned so much and got some great information from you, so thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Okay. Continuing on with our agenda, we'll get to item number 2, which is comments from the Deputy Designated Federal Officer, DOE, EPA, and TDEC. And we will start with Ms. Keynes again.
I think I already gave
You've
my
given
comments
okay, all
with
right.
regard to the celebration.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Adler?
I have nothing to add this month, thanks.
Well, thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Connie?
I don't have any significant announcements, but I'd be more than happy to attempt to answer questions if asked.
Christoph?
No comments. I'll be also willing to answer questions.
I was going to say something about attorneys and all that. Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you all being here and being available to assist us when need be. Item 3, public comment period. Ms. Hagee?
evening. The public comment period is now open. I have David Martin wish to speak.
I'm a member of the EM/Stewardship Committee. I'm also chair of the Roane County Commission's Environmental Review Board. On that board, over the last year or so, we've been a little bit disturbed that some groups do not do a very good job of notification on public meetings and how the public meetings are, information meetings are held. That said, I want to commend EM for putting out the word about this meeting. Y'all reached into your pockets and bought an advertisement. Good job. We appreciate that. I think this is an important meeting, and y'all obviously do too, by the way you advertised it. Briefly, our Roane County Environmental Board, we meet every first Thursday of every month except July and December. You can find out more about us by going on the Roane County government page. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Are there any other members of the public who want to comment? As a Citizens Advisory Board to the Department of Energy on environmental cleanup, we want to encourage the community at large to attend and participate in our board and committee meetings. If you are unable to attend, please send in your questions and comments to the address shown. Appropriate comments and questions will be read during the public comments section of the SSAB meeting and will be given the same consideration by the board and DOE as those given in person. Meeting schedules and ways to communicate with the board can be obtained by calling 241-4583 or by visiting our website.
Thank you very much. Presentation time. So please put your cell phones on silent and let's pay attention tonight. Our presentation tonight is going to be on the Oak Ridge Reservation Groundwater Strategic Plan. Bill McMillan will be doing the presentation, and Bill is the Portfolio Federal Project Director for Oak Ridge National Laboratory, where he has responsibility for the management of all environmental management cleanup, decontamination, decommissioning, waste storage, and disposal operations at the laboratory. Bill has been with the Department of Energy for 29 years. He joined the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Program in 1995. Bill's career has also included 5 years with the DOE Y-12 site office, 3 years with Savannah River Operations Office, and 5 years with the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Bill has a Master of Science degree in Environmental Systems Engineering from Clemson University and a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from the College of Charleston. Bill, we look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
It's good to be here, and I'll be glad to share this information. And we've got several people from my team that are here that are also working in the groundwater program. So whatever questions come up, I'm sure there's lots of expertise here to help answer the questions. I'm going to have a couple of people assisting me with the briefing. These are folks that are really active in the project. Steve Cook is on my project team with the federal side. He's our DOE project manager. And he's going to talk primarily about the off-site groundwater assessment, how that's been going and where we are with the status of that. Steve Haas is going to talk about the modeling work that we're doing. And so those are both in the briefing. I'll be talking, kicking it off, talking about the strategy as a whole and the program that was developed to manage the strategy. And so any of us, then I'll conclude with what's coming up coming up next. Let's see, is this working? Here we go. So this is the agenda, as I kind of went ahead and kind of briefed as the introduction. We'll do an overview of the strategy, some of the background maybe you've heard before because we briefed, I think, the strategy a year and a half ago. So some of it may be repetition, but a lot of people are new here and haven't heard it. So I'll go through some of the background on how we developed and decided to come up with the strategy and how it was developed. And then the implementation strategy, and there's really 3 parts to the implementation that we're committed to. It's the program, the off-site assessment, and the flow model for the region. And then next priorities and long-term implementation. Okay, so prior to 2013, there was some recognition that we were starting to see maybe some hits in some of the monitoring systems around, and that caused us to say we need to develop a good strategy for help us in decision making. And so there was a commitment developed with the FFA parties, primarily TDEC, EPA, and DOE, to have some workshops and really get our arms wrapped around management of the groundwater program so that we could ensure good decision making on our project. So we started in 2013 with a series of workshops. There were 6 workshops held to really take a look on a watershed basis. We've got 3 major watersheds on the reservation. We took each one of those watersheds and pulled all the information together that we have for each of those watersheds and the groundwater plumes associated with them. And then we took all that information, came up with a modified hazard ranking system to rank the projects and plumes in those areas and prioritize them, and developed a strategy around what is the program supposed to do to look at these and assess that and use and implement a path through the groundwater program to help us in decision making for the EM program as a whole. So the purpose of the strategy was developed to document a path forward for managing the challenges, and then support decision making. First of all, to make sure that we're protective of off-site human health and environment. Then secondly, to manage our groundwater plumes on the reservation and to restore them to beneficial use where practicable, and achieve final cleanup goals in the long run for the baseline. So they are in a logical sequence of activities arrived at by first off-site, on-site, and making decisions towards final cleanup goals. So this slide kind of shows the areas, past operations at the sites over the years has led to contamination of some of the areas of the reservation, and that's the purple shading you see around the active sites. And so each of these plumes, as I mentioned in the strategy development phase, were defined and identified and studied. We had 35 different plumes that were defined as part of the workshops to incorporate into the strategy. And of course inside this bullet here is, there's various types of contaminants that we've identified, radionuclides to organics at various of these, and they go pretty much all kinds of depths. It depends on the plume, the location, but they're anywhere from shallow to deep. And we identified data gaps and uncertainties that we're missing in the data. So that was the definition phase. We then grouped these things into candidate projects. We've got 36 projects that are included in the strategy that have all been ranked. The projects can address one or more plumes in an area. And the projects themselves will focus on either doing further investigations where we have data gaps to help fill those gaps, maybe some early actions if we see that there's risk out there that really need rapid to be addressed rapidly. And then maybe we get into some of these studies and identify some other things that we need to be doing too. So as we work through these projects, it'll help us with the path forward for addressing the holistic issue of groundwater contamination on and or off the reservation. So to manage all that work, one of the first things was to set up a program, and we've done that. The program is to help us with the prioritization of the different projects that the strategy has developed, identify any actions that we need to take early on and incorporate them into CERCLA decisions. So we're actively involved with the regulators on how to incorporate these projects into the CERCLA process and prioritize milestones associated with it as we go through our life cycle. Obviously, as you remember from the series of bullets in the arrow there from left to right, the first thing was to make sure that we're looking whether there's any risk to any off-site receptors. And so the first priority project that came out of the strategy was to address this offsite risk. And that's what Steve's going to talk about with the offsite groundwater sampling program that we're doing now. And then to look at the regional flow models, we need a good model to be able to help us make decisions on groundwater movement in the area and what the potential is for migration. And so we have an active activity going on that Steve Haas is going to talk about to help us with the modeling effort to develop a regional flow model that can be used, and hopefully it'll be a plug-and-play model that as we go through making decisions, we can use this model to spit out good results that will predict over time what the migration potential is of the various plumes. So I think I've covered that. So our first strategy is the offsite. We have a project in the strategy called the Melton Valley Exit Pathway from Undetermined Sources. And that's the project really which has the highest potential for offsite migration. And so we have set up a study where we're looking for migration from Melton Valley, trying to understand the pathway of flow from that. And it can either surface in the Clinch River or go under the river. And this is what we were concerned about, whether it's going under the river to receptors on the other side. And so you see project number 1 here is the offsite groundwater assessment work, which is underway now. It'll be completed with a report issued in the first quarter of fiscal year 17. And then next projects will kind of be determined by the outcome of the first project, actually. If there's additional needs that are identified in this offsite assessment, we would obviously attack those as the next project. If we have successful determinations there that we're not very concerned with offsite risk, then we might want to focus on the reservation, some of the reservation plumes. And so that's kind of a TBD as where the second project is, but we do have a milestone placeholder, as I'll show you in a few minutes, to have a FFA milestone that's developed for the next action. This chart is kind of shows the near-term schedule associated with our work in the strategy. This first section was the development of the strategy itself. The blue diamond designates there was a milestone there to have that strategy completed in a report that was provided to the regulators, and then it was eventually approved in the second quarter of 14. Setting up the base program is an ongoing activity that we'll maintain under the water quality water resources restoration program that's part of our that UCOR manages for us. The off-site groundwater assessment was begun in the early fiscal year 14 timeframe. Work plan was developed as a FFA deliverable and accepted by the regulators. A sampling analysis plan was developed as part of that work plan and is now underway. It initiated in January with the first round of sampling. We have a second round of sampling that's scheduled for later this summer. That way we're getting 2 different seasons to incorporate into the study. And then the final report, preparation of that is mostly going on in fiscal year 16 with the final report in the first quarter of 17. On the regional flow model, actions got started again in fiscal year 14. There's a technical advisory group that's been set up that is managing, doing that modeling work, and it includes experts from across the country, actually, that's familiar with karst geology that we have here and how water moves through it. And we're using test case at Y12 that we have very good data on in the Y12 Valley. But anyway, that model is being developed and matured and drafted, and then that'll be put into use in the fiscal year 17 timeframe. And then here's the milestone with for the future milestone based on the outcome of the early action work on the offsite study. Okay, so the program, as I mentioned, was set up. It's part of the Water Resources Restoration Program that UCOR manages. We have staffed it. It's got a full-time senior hydrogeologist who's very understanding and expert on groundwater on the reservation, and that's Steve. He's going to be talking about the modeling effort. It includes the sampling and any development or wells, management of the well systems that we have for the program, and it includes the groundwater modeling effort and managing all that work and putting that model together. And we report annually the status of the program and the status of everything in the remediation effectiveness report, which is typically issued in the March timeframe of each year. So that's where things are documented. Of course, the off-site study will be documented in a standalone report that's in early 17. So at this point, I think Steve Cook will kind of walk you through the, that's probably the best way, walk you through the off-site work.
For the off-site assessment, the off-site groundwater assessment, we developed a remedial site evaluation work plan using the DQO process to determine the when, where, and how of the data collection effort. The questions we were wanting to answer are, are there hazardous substances in off-site groundwater in wells and springs? Where, if so, where? Can they be attributed? Are they in some way related to Oak Ridge Reservation contamination plumes? Is there a threat to health associated with such hazardous substances to the extent we find them in this study? And is there a DOE action required? So those are some of the questions we were looking at with this effort. It involved both EPA Region 4 and TDEC, as well as DOE, in developing and going through the DQO process and determining the locations. TDEC co-sampled at 5 of the locations that we identified for sampling. We spent this past fall, talking with property owners to the west of the reservation, west of the Clinch River, in areas that at locations that we believe there was a well that would be potentially suitable for us to sample. And that was done in the fall. We obtained license agreements, and we started our sampling in the winter quarter, FY15 Q2. And that has been completed, and the next sampling event is planned for this coming summer.
Go.
Yes. So we started out looking at over 100 sites, 100 locations, generally to the west, southwest of the Clinch River there.
Why don't you point out where ETTP is so
Yeah.
people can orient themselves?
Let's see if I
Little
can.
button right there.
There is ETTP, right? Have I got it
In
wrong?
white.
Hello, I'm up here. That's ETTP,
That's
right
ETTP.
there. That's ETTP. So this is Highway 58, and those are the locations you see generally west of all of the valleys.
Microphone.
The locations generally west of all of the valleys that we have our plumes that we monitor on the reservation. Of those 100 locations that we researched, we ended up with 43 viable locations where we could sign license agreements with people. And they were 5-year license agreements to sample their wells or springs. 32 wells and 11 springs, 43 total involved in this study. So we looked at a very wide range of constituents, and we analyzed to very low levels, very low detection levels. And the initial screening, we looked at just comparing with EPA primary drinking water standards, which are applicable to public water systems. We are also evaluating the data and comparing it to quite a few other benchmarks, but our initial screening, we're comparing to the primary drinking water standards. And in comparing the data that we've collected in the first round of sampling to the primary drinking water standards, we had exceedances of primary drinking water standards at 3 of the 43 locations that we sampled. And one of those locations had an exceedance for lead. One of those locations had an exceedance for lead and for gross alpha activity. We resampled that location in April, and there was no gross alpha present in the sample. So it's an example of kind of sometimes the ambiguity in the sampling results. Another location, we had an exceedance of the combined radium-226 and radium-228 activity. That was in the regular sample. In a replicate sample, there wasn't an exceedance. So those are 3 of the 43 locations where there was exceedances for a very limited number of constituents of primary drinking water standards. We're continuing to review the results. There are other detects out there at very low levels. We're trying to understand them and understand, the degree to which they may be associated with naturally occurring radon, background levels of other constituents. And as we go through this analysis process, and we're doing this in partnership with TDEC and Tennessee Department of Health, as we go through this analysis process, it's going to inform the implementation and the next steps in the implementation of the groundwater strategy. We've worked very hard, and TDEC has worked very hard with us to partner in this and to figure out how we need to talk to each other and how we need to talk to the public. And so a communication matrix has been developed that kind of outlines how we're going to do that, how we're going to share data. And we've been doing that essentially in real time. When results come in, we share them with TDEC and we discuss them informally with the subject matter experts. And we have a meeting scheduled for July 8th to kind of compare notes and share our interpretations of the data. In the meantime, we're sending summary level information of the data to the property owners, and those letters should be going out within a week or so. And I mentioned the meeting set for July, so I think that's it, Bill. I think that's it for me. And Steve, you're up next.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, you can go to the first slide.
This is it.
Oh, all right. I'm going to change gears a bit. Steve was talking about the first program of the groundwater strategy, which was very focused on getting some detailed groundwater chemistry and looking specifically at trying to understand the character of the groundwater. The second program, this development of an Oak Ridge hydrologic model, is on a much different scale and really aimed at much different objectives. One thing we realized that if we look around at Oak Ridge and other DOE sites around the country, we are the one major site which does not have a sophisticated developed groundwater model. Not that that necessarily is the be-all and the end-all, but the other sites are demonstrating that that can be a very, very powerful tool for future planning and decision-making. So the decision was made by the strategy committee to go ahead and begin to develop a groundwater model. The idea is that we would use it on a regional scale to look, and I have some maps in the presentation, we can take a look at where the area is covered, but to extend beyond the immediate boundaries of the Oak Ridge Reservation so it could develop the model and use it to investigate groundwater conditions, boundary water groundwater conditions in the area and in the context that the ORR sits. The first step is underway, and we're sticking pretty much to the schedule that was discussed, and it's really just a first step. As I'll go through in a minute, there's a lot of intricacies and problems we've had to overcome in developing the model, but we have made good progress, and I think at the end of the initial period, we will have a model which will serve as an excellent platform to answer some what-if questions, and certainly to act as a platform that can be used to address more site-specific questions as remediation decisions are evaluated. As was mentioned, we have a technical advisory group, and this is a group of outside experts that we have a world-class modeler in there. We have a very good geographical information system, vision expert, and we have a all-around good jack of trades, groundwater modeling and general contamination. Bernie Cooper is one gentleman. Actually, it's an international committee because Bernie is a Canadian, and has worked in Oak Ridge for a number of years and has helped. I've worked with him back in the 90s, and he's helped a number of our projects out. So he's come back and is involved in the modeling project. The Technical Advisory Committee serves as a sounding board for ideas. They are plugged in to a lot of the academic and the industry efforts to develop groundwater models, so they can act as a conduit to help us get the best choices made and the state-of-the-art information to the model development. We have a tentative, and actually that's been finalized now, we have developed a model area. I'll show you a map in a minute. We're using a software program called EarthVision. EarthVision is, as we'll talk about in a minute, one of the most difficult things of developing a model in Oak Ridge is getting a handle on the complex site geology. It's sort of interesting, when I talk to my colleagues at other DOE sites, they always say, oh, we've got the most complex geology. Well, I always say that about Oak Ridge. But in many cases, we do. We have it much worse in terms of the complexity in the subsurface, the very complicated structure, and the heterogeneity in the subsurface. EarthVision is a very sophisticated tool that takes existing data, which has been collected over the past 40 years on the Oak Ridge. We can enter it into the EarthVision and then use it to visualize and to develop layers which we can then input into the groundwater model to actually do the modeling. Without using EarthVision, we would never be able to successfully model. We're using a state-of-the-art code. We had a code selection process, and we have chosen a USGS code. ModFlow is a standard, is an industry standard groundwater flow model. The survey has just introduced a new version called USG, which stands for Unstructured Grid. Basically, it's a model that gives you the capability of dealing with the complex geology here in Oak Ridge. Most models, if you look at them in publications, they'll have modeled simple, flat-lying beds that are homogeneous. We don't have that here. We have dipping beds, and they're very heterogeneous. So the unstructured grid gives us the opportunity to tackle that in a quantitative sense. That's the good side. The bad side is we are one of the first, or probably the first site in the world to use this model with as complicated a problem as we have here. This is the feedback we get from our technical advisory group. So we've had a lot of operational issues to sort out, but in conjunction with our TAG and with modelers at Leidos, our major modeling subcontractor for this, we've solved most of those. We have a couple we're still chasing around, but the progress is very, very encouraging. We're to the point now where the model is beginning to bear fruit.
Test area.
Oh, yeah, and I think we've got I was looking for the next figure. No.
Nope.
There you go.
There you go.
One of the things in using EarthVision and the combination with EarthVision and the USGS code was, does it work? There's a number of modules that you add on to mimic or to treat flow through karst conduits, for instance, flow through streams. And these have all been used with ModFlow, but they had never been tried in many cases with ModFlow USG. So we were the guinea pigs for that. That took a lot of effort, but it's paid out very well because we now have a very robust and sophisticated system. And we have picked the site. This is the reservation in general. Shown here are the boundaries of the model area. So this is really the Y12. This is the Y12 plant. This is Bear Creek Valley. ETTP is up here. ORNL is down in here. So we are extending the model out to include this larger region here in no small reason so we can investigate some questions which come up about what might be happening with groundwater off-site in this area that Steve mentioned, where we're looking at evaluating, is there off-site contamination? Y12 is a site that has an enormous amount of hydrologic data that's been gathered over since the 1980s. So we decided to use it as a test case. And what we did is put the model together and focus it on Y12 and do all the testing, all the add-on modules, testing the EarthVision link between the model, making sure it worked. It does. The tests have been successful, and now we're expanding the model to include this whole area and model the whole area. It's not quite that simple because the data density here is quite high. The data density out here is quite low. So a number of assumptions are having to be made when we extrapolate out into this area And the insight we've gotten from the test case is really helping us on that. So some statistics there, it's about 250 square miles. We're modeling actually a block, which is, this is the plan view of it, and the block goes down 1,000 feet. And I think I've covered most of those if you want to go on to the next one. So the steps were, this is a geologic map. And actually, two of the principal authors of this map are in the room, Bob Hatcher and Dick Cattell. But it represents a huge resource for modeling because it shows in detail the surface distribution, it shows structures, and then allows us to extrapolate down to see what those structures might look like in the subsurface, where we only have limited drill data. So this map and a bunch of data from a whole variety of investigations was included. As I say, we worked in detail on the Y12 test area. Then we fed the information into EarthVision and got it to generate a series of input files so that all of this information about the distribution, the 3D distribution of rock types, and more importantly, the 3D distribution of the hydraulic properties which control how water moves through the rocks, were incorporated in those files, and now they sit in EarthVision. And this is an EarthVision view. It's basically repeating the map of Hatcher and Cattell and Lemitsky. But it is now, this is a completely electronic map. And if you want to go ahead, what you can do, yeah, go, okay, yeah, oh, back up one. There you go. Back up one more. Yeah. There. This is looking down the Bear Creek Valley in cross-section view. And each one of those is the various formations of the bedrock geology that makes up Y12, the valley, the Bear Creek Valley that Y12 lays in. Each is very different lithologically, and each is very different in terms of its hydrologic properties. So without this kind of insight that we got and were able to capture and put into input files for the model using EarthVision, we never could undertake a meaningful model. So this is, it's a bunch of us been working on this, especially a lot of midnight oil has been burned by the modelers at Leidos. And this is really a proud accomplishment, and it's working. After all the work, we're to the point now where we can see that this is going to provide a good basis for modeling groundwater. It links well to USG. USG gives us a lot of sophistication and flexibility. So in the future, with the model working, we'll be in a position to do a number of what-if scenario evaluations. We can use it to help us cite off-site monitoring locations. We can use it to evaluate various options of what kinds of remedial actions you might take. So it's, like all models, you have to be careful about the question you ask it. But if you ask it the right questions, it can be a very, very powerful tool for planning and future remediation. I think that might be, yeah, this is just, again, the model area, the superficial geology, and to locate ORNL, ETTP, and the Y12 site right here. We're going down, we're taking the model down to the Tennessee River. So we're having to incorporate data from TVA and river stages and river gauges, all the Clinch River data. So it's a huge amount of data that we have compiled. Okay, and I think that's it. Okay, and I'll be happy to answer any questions when the question and answer period.
We'll get there in just a second. So, next steps, next priorities. I talked about, I've kind of already summarized this, but we have a placeholder milestone is in the FY, early FY, for FY 17, 18, 17, unless I'm getting my years mixed up. But after the groundwater assessment is done, to establish the next priority project for us to work on. And so that kind of depends on the outcome of the off-site assessment that we're currently doing. Some of the candidates, such as the Melton Valley or Bear Creek Valley area to to fill data gaps and increase our understanding of the plumes that we have there. Could be, some of these doing we're working on now the site-wide treatability study at ETDP, but one of the candidate projects could be the 7,000 area at Bethel Valley where there's an existing volatile organic plume. Or the hydrofracture area at ORNL is another high priority for us to look at. That's an area there was hydrofracture activities going on back in the 90s that has associated contamination with it. All those are interior plumes, and kind of where we go is going to be a collaborative decision between DOE, TDEC, and EPA to make that decision on what we do after the off-site study is completed. This is our milestone chart. I put this in here just to demonstrate the records of decision that we have to make that pertain to various groundwater activities. All of them are out in the last 10 to 15 years of our life cycle baseline in our cleanup program. You'll see the fiscal years in the 30s for the most part. There's this ETTP site-wide rod is running ahead of the rest because we are nearing completion of our active demolition work out there and remedial actions are underway. But then getting into the Y12 and Melton Valley areas is all for final decisions in record of decision space out in the 30s timeframe. So this activity that we're doing now with the modeling effort, the groundwater plume work, the understanding and filling of data gaps is all driven to support early action risk, addressing early action risks, and to develop strategies for incorporating into these final records of decision. So I think that's it. That's the last slide, I believe. So I guess it's question and answer time, Dave.
Bill, thank you very much. We will start with the board. Steve, thank you. Mike, thank you. You guys might be prepared to answer some questions because I know some hard ones are coming at you. Yeah. Dr. Jimmy Bell, you were up first, sir.
Thank you. Steve,
Please use your microphone, even though it's your last day.
if I understand your message, you have not proven any release off-site of radioactivity. You have indications one time, the next time it didn't prove out in more than one case. And to prove it, you're going to have to repeat and get the same answers more than one time. You see what I mean?
Yeah, we are, it's on. Is that on? Yeah. We have detected radionuclides at very low levels in these samples, and the methods we're using are this is partly a research project, so we're going to extremely low detection levels, and when you do that, you're going to pick up things, and what we're trying to figure out is what is the source of these radionuclides. There is naturally occurring uranium.
Steve,
in
excuse me.
Shale rock, for example.
But the objective is to determine whether or not you have an off-site release. And if I understand your data, you have not shown that you have an off-site release because you have to repeat it more than one time.
Right.
Now, a error can be in the analysis, it can be in the sampling, it can be across a wide range of contributors, but you have to show that it is there and it's there every time you measure it.
You're
doesn't
correct.
come and go.
That's correct.
You're correct.
So how do you then respond to a landowner on the other side of the river, so to speak, about your data? You don't really have anything to tell him.
Yeah, and we're not responding that we have any final data at all. What we did want to do with the property owners was to give them some feedback on the samples that were taken initially. And also, it's very clear that we're continuing the study with another round of sampling here in the fall. And then there's follow-up sampling after that if needed in FY16 to try to get that repeatability if we can. So, but we felt obligated, since we took samples from people's wells, that we wanted to give them some feedback. And that feedback is really based upon the whether or not their health is being impacted. And that's something that TDH and TDEC are helping us with, that communication. But it's also giving them a very broad summary, high-level summary of that first round of sampling without drawing any real conclusions on it, other than whether or not there's something there that could impact their health.
I would question whether or not you're causing trouble to tell them, hey, one time we picked something up, and then next time we didn't do it. You can cause alarm that way. Are you concerned about that?
I think I could maybe address that a bit. As Bill mentioned, the levels we're sampling to are extremely low. They're typically almost an order of magnitude, in some cases, lower than levels which are required to be reported by regulatory monitoring or others. One of the reasons we're doing that is we want to sort of look at the leading edge of something we might be finding, or something that might be there. One of the disadvantages of that is, especially with radionuclides, is that you're down in an area where you are above the absolute detection limit, but you are below the limit where you can quantify with 90% or more certainty the result. So what you're left with is we call them radioactive ghosts. You're chasing ghosts. You have very low level numbers. One way to evaluate those is to, on repeat sampling, see what happens. And it'd be very interesting to see the repeat sampling in the summer. If that sort of phenomenon is what's determining what we're seeing, we should see quite a different sample of these very low level ghosts. They're levels way below any health concern. They may represent the leading edge of some contamination for Oak Ridge. They may be fallout with the transuranic radionuclides. That's one thing that's very poorly understood, is what kinds of concentrations you have due to simple atmospheric fallout during the testing period. We're down at that level of analysis. So there's not a quick answer, but I think speaking for Bill a bit, I think our intent is we want to be honest with the homeowners. We want to actually get the homeowners incorporated in the study.
Absolutely.
So that we're not in a position of saying something that's untrue or over-interpreting something. One other thing about finding the presence of detection or presence of contamination, there are suites of contaminants from most of the Oak Ridge facilities. I'm most familiar with Y12, but you rarely find in the plumes at Y12 one contaminant by itself. It's a mixture of contaminants. So in these offsite wells, if we're not finding these mixtures, that's something we take into consideration. Again, looking at the level. It's a maddening process because we are, again, at the cutting edge of this kind of analytical chemistry.
One more question on this subject. Should you find that indeed there is an off-site rad or other release, what will DOE do?
Okay.
And,
I've got a mic.
and then Bill, please add
Okay.
to
Sure.
anything. Yeah, I guess one point, the first thing, this provides a great opportunity for me to clarify one thing that I've been wanting to say, and that is that the first thing we have to do is we have to determine whether it really is something that has come from the Oak Ridge Reservation.
Right.
So there is the possibility that there can be detections of radionuclides that come from radon or come from naturally occurring constituents that are in the environment. So the first thing that we have to do is confirm that it's actually coming from the Oak Ridge Reservation. And if there is something that is an exceedance, we of course will consult with the Department of Health, the Tennessee Department of Health, and determine what the proper what the proper action is with regard to somebody's well water. I would, however, like to reiterate that many of our sampling locations are actually seeps and is not water that's being utilized for municipal purposes. Some of them are wells, but some of them are also seeps. So we have to look, we have to determine whether it comes from the reservation, we have to determine whether there's any sort of risk or impact, and we'll do that in consultation with our regulators, and then we'll determine if it's a supply that needs to be supplemented, perhaps with municipal water or not. So it's really a process. So.
Yeah, and I was going to echo that as well. It's part of the science, I think, to determine, once we understand what the potential source of a contaminant would be and the level of that, whether it's way down in the grass, as Steve was saying, just above detection, but orders of magnitude less than what's any hazard, maybe the answer is continued monitoring at some frequency. Maybe if it's high enough or we see some trends in that data, it's back to trying to get people off their wells. And like Sue said, there's municipal water available that they can tap into. And DOE has had an active program of helping to support initiation of that with the property owners out there. So it's kind of an ongoing science, and it's part of the program to help us determine what that next step would be.
One quick example of how that operates is something which has happened with this sampling round. We were getting a number of results that we couldn't explain. And it turns out that if there was radon in the system, we could explain the results. So we did a repeat sampling, and we sent a sample off specifically for a radon analysis, which requires very special handling. And then we did some additional follow-on counting of the existing samples using a hypothesis that if there was radon, we should see changes, predict the kinds of changes we should see in the concentrations. Everything fit perfectly. We also got 600 picocuries per liter of radon in the water sample that we took. So that is above one proposed standard, but below another proposed standard. There is no radon standard. But we do know that there is, and then in researching further, actually, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation in their 305B groundwater reports has a section identifying East Tennessee as an area with elevated radon. So it fits together, but in that case, the radon is a natural issue, and we are passing that over to TDEC because it's not a DOE issue.
Okay. Dr. Hatcher, I believe you're next, then Jennifer, then Chris, and then Richard.
Okay. I just want to follow up on Jimmy's comment, and that is just to ask why, when you got basically a null set in your analyses and the detection of the potential contaminants, why didn't you go back immediately and do the resampling again and again until you got a representative sample and realizing you're at the detection limits just about?
Well, the hydrologic system is, as you know, has a dry season and a wet season, and you can get appreciable changes in, especially for surface water features, appreciable concentration changes and composition changes. So the initial puzzle we tried to solve was how to get the best data for the best value. And what we decided to do was to focus our sampling on getting a dry season round of samples, which will be what's coming up this summer, and then a wet season. In the case of the well that showed the elevated alpha and lead, we went back and resampled that immediately simply because of the high of those. And it turns out that is the well that has the radon in it. But looking at the data from other wells, there's radon elsewhere because we can see the telltale. Now we know what to look for, so we can see the telltale signs elsewhere. Probably about half of the wells we sampled, actually.
The Oak Ridge Reservation holds an important place in our nation's history, and it continues to be a vital part of our national security and scientific research community. But parts of the reservation require cleanup as a result of decades of energy research. The U.S. Department of Energy looks to the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board as the voice of the community on environmental issues. You're welcome to attend meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board to learn more. Call us or visit our website.